What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Hawks Film Room podcast. Please make sure you like, subscribe, share the podcast, tell a friend, whatever it may be. The Hawks had pretty much a wire-to-wire win over the Philadelphia 76ers last night, 132-119. At some point, I tweeted this would be good for the net rating, and then Philly did what they did in the last game, which was make it pretty interesting down the stretch. This team, Jeff Dowden had 9 points in the fourth quarter and showed that Alex Reese had 8 as well. So they definitely didn't go away quietly, but the Hawks were able to walk out with a win. Definitely some standout performances we'll end up talking through. But I'm really excited to bring on Austin Krell. He's a Sixers beat writer on Patterson.com. How you doing today, my guy?
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'm good. Yeah, I'm definitely happy to have you. So I know that Sixers fans in general may be a little bit less tapped in as of late, right? And of course, with some of the injuries and the fluctuations in lineups. For example, we didn't see a Dembona tonight, or guys like that. These young guys who ideally would have wanted some reps, either if they are going through some injuries. But I'm definitely curious to hear your thoughts about this game and some of the larger scale things with the Sixers. I'll start off with the Hawks perspective. I thought that last night was a really good Trey game. He's now got 4 straight games shooting about 50% from the field. The efficiency things have been a talking point all season. He hasn't had the best offensive infrastructure around him. He's been playing through Achilles and a shoulder thing. But 28 points, 12 assists, 58% from the field, got to the free throw line 11 times, and also shot 4-6 from 3. Since Jalen's gone down, his shot quality in general has also gone down. So he hasn't been as effective as we definitely would have liked to have been. I have seen him, but over this last 4 games, they're 3-1. He's at about a 72 shooting percentage and putting up good numbers. So definitely a good sign for him finding his stroke, especially as of late. Like, he was struggling from the floater range, but he's found that a little bit. So yeah, what did you think about Trey's performance last night?
So the first thing is obviously the efficiency, 10 of 11 from the foul line. He got there. He only took 12 shots total to get to his 28. So really that the free throws really helped the true shooting bump up there. Assist turnover ratio of basically 2.0 to 1, which is really good for a point guard. I expect a heliocentric offense and a heliocentric point guard, like Trey, to rack up assists, and then also, because they're taking more passing risks, also commit turnovers. So 5 turnovers in a vacuum is not great for anyone. 5 turnovers in the context of he has the ball in his hand, 35% of the time anyway, maybe 40%, 35, 30, 40% of the time. That's fair. It's still not great, but fair. But again, and 12 assists are pretty good. One thing that I will say about Trey that I think I've always given him a reputation for is I think there's a difference fundamentally between a good player and a good passer and a good playmaker. And I think a good playmaker and a true point guard is someone who doesn't always know that they're passing to the assist. They don't know that they're not 100% sure that the guy they're passing to is going to take the shot, but they know that he is in position to make a pass, one pass away to the next guy and move the ball down the chain.
Right.
And Trey, I've always been critical of whether he truly does that all the time or whether he only passes to the assist. And that was originally a criticism I had of James Harden, and James Harden, having covered him, I understand now. 2 to the ball, he's finding the guy in the middle to break the pressure, and then they're finding the guy on the second side of the floor, what have you. Trey is similar in that regard. But last night, it's what I noticed plays where Trey was there was no way he was getting the assist, and he was still making the pass. So kudos to him for that. Yeah, I think he props up that offense, especially in an ecosystem where it's Dyson Daniels is the other starter guard. But I also think part of why the Hawks have had disappointment in so many seasons after the Eastern Conference Finals run in 2021, was because they're playing a very high usage guard who eats up a ton of minutes and is also one of the most meaningfully damaging defenders in the league. So I'm willing to retract some of my criticisms of Trey, but not all of them.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. And I think to sort of back up your point about him passing the ball more when it's not necessarily for an assist, He's currently 4th in the NBA in passes made per game at 61.6. That's a career high. Season prior, he was at 55.6. Season before that, he was even lower. He was like, I think, below 50. He was at 49.4. So he's bought into this offense, right? So you touched on some of the heliocentrism. What's interesting about this Hawks offense in general is, like, as they've added more guys who can handle the ball, like Caris Levert is one of those guys, Dyson, we're seeing Trey run up the floor and let someone else initiate the offense. We're seeing there were multiple times, especially in the fourth quarter, when the Sixers were making it a little bit dicey. Trey would be it was one particular play where Caris brought the ball up. Trey was at the other free throw line and ended up being an alley-oop to Onyeka Okongwu. So it's like they have these more. He's trusting his guys more, but he also has guys around him who can actually dribble the ball. Like there was a long time where the Hawks like started front court was DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, and Clint Capella. None of those guys can play make. None of those guys can create for themselves. Kevin Huerter was another guy who kind of was like super reliant on him. And so as much as I think that he has, and he absolutely has, like he's gotten better at doing that, right? There were times where we were begging him to let Jalen Johnson bring the ball up the court in Jalen's first couple of seasons because we saw what he could be in transition. And Trey didn't necessarily have the facility to trust him at that point. And, you know, at some level, I'm like, okay, well, can I blame him? I mean, he's been playing with guys who can't dribble, but he's fully embraced that. And I think that's been really big for us because the Hawks, for example, they have the most 30-plus assists games of their entire franchise right now. They've had 34. The night prior to playing you guys against Golden State, we had 6 guys have above 6 assists, or 5 guys with more than 6 assists, which is the first time that's happened this season, and it hasn't happened it's only happened 13 times in NBA history. So they've done a much better job, but I think and those are all the criticisms you said, like those are all valid criticisms for Trey. Like I think that in a lot of ways he had to grow as a player and as a leader and all that. And he didn't necessarily have that early in his career, right? And so I think that as he's continued to grow, it's been really fruitful and also like really rewarding for Hawks fans in general because we get to see him be a leader. But I was curious, you know, I know we highlighted Trey. Was there anyone from the Sixers side, you know, that sort of stood out to you from last night?
I think just Justin Edwards has been a very pleasant surprise for the Sixers in a season that has been pretty dreck. I wrote it my game recap last night, like endlessly impressed with his development. He is not the player he was in Summer League, not the player he was start of the season, not the player he was 10 games ago. Like that kid has gotten better every single, every handful of games, there's something new about him. And like this wasn't really a thing last night, but he's like hitting off the dribble threes now and off of like crossovers. He's one of the team's best just get to the point drivers on the team. Like there's a lot of guys who kind of scamper laterally across the floor when they're trying to drive. They'll like go sideways and they're kind of making progress, but not really. He's like he gets ahead of steam and just finds a crease and just he's just cutting through butter really with a hot knife. So he's gotten better at like just driving on a straight line and sort of getting to the point there. Defensively, there's still some rookie things, still sometimes where some more veteran assignments will beat him up for a couple of fouls early, but just the shooting has come along tremendously. He's not getting into the mid-range and shooting off the dribble there. So really a game from him. And you guys learn the Quentin Grimes experience. Don't let him get going.
Yeah, I saw the way he played in Houston too. I think he's had the biggest jump in scoring, definitely post trade deadline, but definitely in the month of March. I just saw someone tweet out like where his numbers have been. Like prior to the deadline, he was averaging 10 points per game. He's now at 19, I think. Let me just check. But yeah, he's been so good. He's averaging 28 points per game in March. Between October and February, he was at 10.7. Definitely the biggest jump. So he's been unreal. I was honestly impressed with Edwards too. Like I saw a lot of Sixers people talk about how he's grown. Saw you talk about it. He was not hesitating at all. Like if he had Trey on him, he was driving, and it ended up usually in a paint touch or a foul or a good shot at the rim. So I was a little bit lower on him in the draft. So to see him figure out his role and grow in this vacuum that's happened on the Sixers roster, I think has been pretty cool. I think. Another guy I'd probably give some flowers to was Jeff Dowden. Felt like he could kind of get like wherever he wanted at some points. Was he in Portland? I want to say, was that where he was?
He was in Toronto with Nick.
Toronto.
So for crash course on people who are outside of the Philly bubble, basically the team is comprised of former Houston Rockets or former, like everyone on the team generally has a pre-existing connection to the team, except for like Paul George or, you know, this guy or that guy. Most of them have, like, whether it's Kyle Lowry and Eric Gordon, or it's Jeff Doughton. Like, a lot of the guys of the team have prior experience with Nick, with Daryl, and Daryl Morey in different environments. So they end up here. And Jeff has been a source of, like, meh for Sixers fans for most of this season. But he's definitely come on strong as we've gotten later, and they've shifted from trying to contend to understanding what they are and trying to get that draft pick.
Yeah. And then was there anyone else besides Trey that caught your eye from last night's game?
Risacher is getting really good. I think he kind of benefited from the Sixers having a very much like ball pressure oriented middle of the floor scheme that sort of favors you if you're an offense that will stretch out in space. And so, like, he was punishing open corner threes all night long. Like, they were giving him those open corner looks, and he was hitting them. But he just like, super athletic wing forward type. It seems like he's going to be, and granted, like, this is the skeleton version of the Sixers, so it's like it's hard to say like what is real and what isn't. But he, just the way that he pops at the rim and the way like the shooting has come along has been good. Are you guys like? I guess I'm curious. Like, are you guys happy with the progress Onyeka Okongwu has made, or do you feel like he's kind of like you're waiting for him to take that next step? Because everyone coming out of the draft, people were like, "This is Adebayo 2.0."
Yeah. So it's a great question, because I honestly feel like since he started, when he started for the first time, that was against the Knicks on the 20th of January, right? So we have about a 30-game stretch. He's at 14.8 points per game, 9.8 rebounds, 2.8 assists. He's shooting 39% from three. Now, that's on about 2 attempts per game, so not a crazy volume. 66.5 true shooting percentage. And he's also got 3.2 offensive rebounds, right? And so a lot of the criticism around Onyeka, and one of the reasons why he couldn't start over Clint for so long, was that he couldn't rebound. He was undersized. He wasn't super competitive on the glass. And I thought, and that's why I wanted to see him go against Bona, because I don't remember what game it was before we played you guys the first time, but Bona had like a crazy game. I think maybe he had like 15 or 20 rebounds. And he's one of those super athletic bigs that I thought, sometimes could give Onyeka problems because he's super physical. He can out-jump him. And in that first game, I thought Onyeka was pretty good. He's been much better putting a body on someone. But yeah, this has been what Hawks fans have wanted for him for so long. For so long. And what's really special about him, I think, is the passing. So, like, a lot of bigs aren't capable of being a solid defender and a good passer and have good touch around the rim, right? So just by having those three things, and then you throw in a three-point shot, I think Bam is a very lofty goal for any big man to reach. Like, Bam is incredible defensively, of course. He can do things with the ball in his hands, but having at least some aspects of that, I think, is really appealing. And so that would be a great outcome for him. I don't know if I'd say like I think right now, like the way Bam has struggled as a shooter, they're pretty close in terms of offensive, but like the defensive stuff, you'll see it sometimes with the switching. He's really good in those moments, but he's not as athletic as he used to be coming out the draft. Like, he's had some foot injuries, some lower body stuff, but by all means, what Onyeka is doing has been huge for us, and it's definitely reshaped the way that I think they're going to approach the draft in terms of like, okay, prior to this stretch from Onyeka, it might have been we need a starting big. Now it's like, okay, can we get someone who can play with him and back him up? It's probably more so what they're thinking. And I think it's at the point where you're at a substantial enough stretch where you can say, okay, this could be real. And, the only concern with him, I think, is probably the health. He's had some knick-knacky injuries, but no, he's been great. And I think the biggest thing too is like he's creating 7 points per game off his assists. That's not talking about the screen assists. It's not talking about the way he does in the handoff game, but just off his assists that convert. He's basically creating, between his points and his assists, about 22 points per game. Yeah. And that's obviously huge, especially if he can, bring back a little bit more of that defensive versatility, which, he may have a little bit more when we get Jalen Johnson back. But I know we talked about Risacher, so I just want to run a couple of his clips from last night's game. It's really simple for Risacher. Like, it's like, to your point, right? The Sixers are very keen on trying to keep guys out the paint. Here you see like the benefit of having the passing from Onyeka too, but just a quick read, knowing that Chuma Okeke is going to want to help over aggressively. Like, he's already has 2 feet in the paint before the ball even gets put in the middle. And Risacher is that level. He's been that level shooter since like the first 10 games of the season where he really struggled, right? So he's going to capitalize there. But what I really like about him, and this is to your point, like, there were a lot of people who I was one of them, like, skeptical about his athleticism. Like, is he actually an NBA level athlete? I think you see it more in the open court, right? Like, he's not going to dunk on someone in the half court, but you can see how quickly he moves and also how quickly he processes the game, right? So, like, he takes off before Trey has the ball and before Jeff Dowden can even process what's happening, right? So, like, he leaves everyone in the dust, and then Trey goes into a shot fake, which just pulls Edwards just enough, and now it's a lob over the top.
Yeah.
And so I think he makes it really easy for himself because he can read the game so well and because he's a great open court athlete. And then, of course, when you get paired with Trey, like, he's going to get you open. So I think he definitely benefited from that. The Hawks had a pretty high transition frequency. But since he came back from injury, like, he's averaging 15 points per game on elite true shooting, like 64 true shooting percentage. So yeah, it's definitely been a lot of fun watching his growth. And you see it, and like, that's one of the things when you're a younger team, like, you kind of have to take your success game to game and like see the growth over a span, right? So like Risacher, you'd be really frustrated if you watch just the first 10 games and then stop watching the Hawks. But like, if you've consistently been watching him, then you see the growth he's made year over year. And I was curious, like, pre-draft, where were you on him? Like, did you think that he would have this type of rookie season? Because I definitely, like, quite honestly, full disclosure, I didn't. Like, I was a bit pessimistic about the pick, but I think he's been better than I expected for sure.
So I didn't cover this last draft because the Sixers did not have I should have covered it, but I didn't because they had like a mid-lottery. They had a pick just inside the lottery. And so I thought they were going to trade it. I was obviously wrong. It became Jared McCain, who was one of the beacons of light in this season. This draft was generally regarded as a pretty bad draft. I feel like, outside of even like with like the talk about like Risacher versus Alex Sarr, like,
right.
it was very much like, we think these are the 2 best, but even we're not so sure if they're that great in a vacuum. And you could see like what the vision is for a team that, okay, we understand Trae Young has his liabilities, so we're just going to surround him with athletic wings and ball hawks. And like Dyson Daniels is a ball hawk. Sixers tried to like dribble in his vicinity a couple times last night, and I was like, none of you are talented enough to be able to do this, so just don't even try. And then he picked them off. And then, like, obviously you'd have Jalen Johnson and Mogay's place. So like, you have 2 rangy wings in Zachary and Jalen, and you have Dyson Onyeka in the middle, and then Trey. So like, there's a clear vision for like how they can become very good. And then obviously their bench is pretty good. It's funny that like the Clippers were like, yeah, we were happy to give up Terrence Mann for Bogdan. And when the Sixers approached them about Terrence Mann, or when the Sixers approached them in Harden conversations a year ago, it was like Terrence Mann was the untouchable piece. So like, to go from that to like, we will give him up for Bogdanovich is quite a change in heart. And even he's not like playing as much. Like, George Niang is playing more minutes, or at least did last night, than Terrence is. But yeah, it's a shame that Jalen got injured, because that team looks fun, and then I think Risacher is proving to be a strong pick at number 1. I don't know if he's I'm not saying I question it. I just genuinely don't know if he's a star, because I don't know what the future holds. But yeah, I think he's someone to be excited about.
Yeah, he has like a couple moments in each game where it's like, whoa, like, if he leans into that a little bit more, he could be really special, right? So that's the 3 that we saw earlier. I don't know what's going on with the NBA site, but it's not letting me pull clips. But I do want to show the behind the back move he had, because it's those types of things where it's like, whoa, if he can be consistent with this, right? Or if he can be more decisive in the half court, right? So he reads Justin Edwards here because, again, teams look at Zach and he has a sort of a reputation for a loose handle, right? Like, especially early in the season, teams would rough him up. They'd be a little bit more physical with him. And when you're a rookie, you know, you're not necessarily prepared for that, and they're also not going to call it, right? So he would get blown through a lot on steals, and because he was skinny, he just, you know, he's throwing his hands up, and it's a transition on the other way. But he's gotten a lot better at reading this, right? So as Edwards flies out, he's clearly going for the steal. And post game, Zach was saying, like, yeah, I read him for the steal. So the best way to protect the ball is to go behind the back. And it's just a really fluid motion from him in transition to just go behind his back and then get to the rim. And it's like he does this, and it's like, whoa, okay, that's a really nice flash. Like the arena goes ooh and ah. And then he's been more consistent as of late, whether it's a shooter at the rim. Star, I think to be a star, you almost have to go through some struggles as a creator, right? Like right now, we're not asking him to create. So will he have the opportunity or the shot, the shot usage to develop a star shot making ability? That's a bit of more of a question, because, like, for example, I think he's like less than 10% of his shots are self-created. So that's pick and roll, that's isolation, that's post. And so is he getting enough reps outside of the game to develop that? That's really going to be that determining factor, because there's really no better way to learn how to create than to fail at it. So, like, for example, Stephon Castle was getting a lot more reps at that. So, or Modest Buzelis, or even, you know, guys or Alex Sarr to an extent, like they're doing a little bit more with the ball in their hands. So that is something to think about. Like, okay, well, will he get enough chances to be more than just, you know, a floor spacer who cuts? And I think there's times where he does, there's times where he doesn't. I don't know what's going to happen, so I don't want to put ceiling on him. I'd say right now I'm probably, like, of our guys who could get into a start, like, it's definitely Jalen first, but then I put Dyson up there as well with the way that he's been playing defensively. Like, he may not be an all-star, but he's going to replicate all-star level impact with the sum of his defensive and offensive stuff. He didn't have a great shooting night against you guys, but typically he's been pretty good getting in the paint, finishing around guys. So I think that's mainly where I'm at. I'm Risacher, like, he had his third game this season with 16 plus points in a quarter, which is by far the most in the class, but it's also the second most of any teenage rookie, and it's the fifth most of any rookie ever. So when his shot is falling, he is that level scorer. He did it 2 games ago against Charlotte. So, like, two games within 2 out of 3 games, he had that level of shot making for a stretch. So yeah, he again, I don't want to put a stretch. I don't want to put a cap on him, and, you know, he probably won't get rookie of the year with the way that Castle's production has been, even if I do think the efficiency should be leaning more heavily in terms of, like, Zach's argument. But no, he's been really good, and I think again, it's against Charlotte and against, like, the skeleton crew for the Sixers, but I think good teams in general, like, you got to be able to take care of teams games you're supposed to win. This is the most favored the Hawks have been all season. I think it was a 10.5.
Attaboy, Sixers. Way to do it. Way to do it.
Like, we have not been favored against most teams. I think you guys covered it too, probably. I can't remember.
That's the Sixers way. You're down by 20 for most of the game. Quentin Grimes goes on a heater, and then you cover the spread.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same exact script from last game. It was a near wire-to-wire win until Quentin Grimes turned up. But yeah, I wanted to ask too, like, Caris and in general, like, when you think about, like, those Sixers teams with Harden or when they had Ben Simmons and they had Jimmy Butler as a secondary ball handler. Obviously, Harden's more heliocentric than Ben, but when you think about the way those Sixers teams were built and they had someone else to handle the ball, what do you think that did? Because, you know, obviously you have Maxey with Harden, but, like, what do you think Maxey's presence does for Harden? Because we're seeing in general the Hawks have not had that secondary ball handler for the entirety of Trey's career, and right now it's been Dyson, Jalen, and Caris as a committee. What do you think that secondary ball handler does for a team, especially when you have a point guard who can orchestrate?
So I would argue they have had someone in that role, in that they had DeJounte. I just think DeJounte is not really that good, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll say the thing about DeJounte is, like, he could handle the ball, but he was so keyed in on his own shot, or he was not necessarily interested in making, like, you mentioned, like, making a pass to not do an assist. DeJounte was either shooting a midi or he was throwing it to a wide open person. He was never playing within the flow of the offense. But don't want to cut off your point though.
My vision, my view of him changed like when he got traded from San Antonio and immediately like decided to like start a fight with Paolo in like this in like that summer pickup game. Like I was like, this dude is, I don't know, that's something that just doesn't seem right.
They're from the same hometown too. Like that was his guy.
That was just like a very weird thing to like be like, you're not like you don't see how you're above this at your age. But like I do think like Risacher has a ways to go in that. Like, okay, if he's not a great creator for himself yet, is he getting to the line? And his free throw rate is like adjusted for the league average. It's only like 79%. It's only like, you know, it's below average basically by quite a bit for when you compare it relative to the rest of the league. So like he doesn't get to the line all that much. So like how is he getting shots if he's not if he's not taking difficult shots, how is he manufacturing scores? And the reality is like the 3-point percentage is almost league average, but not quite. He still has ways to go. So it's not out of the norm for what he's doing in year one. I do think like the vision for him and Trey needs to be like, how do we get two on the ball? And then weaponize that. And I get the way that you do that is like Risacher, Trae Young pick and roll, and you make them choose like who they're going to go with. Risacher can, if you know, I could just see a world where it's like Quinn Snyder is dialing up Spain pick and roll, and they're back screening for Risacher to dive out of the screen, and it's like, okay, everyone's scrambling because he's a lob threat, or like they're running pin downs for Risacher, and he like last night they run one for Trey, and it's a pin down, and he comes and gets the ball, and he's immediately weaponizing the mid range pressure, and then they lift up, and it's a lob. It's a lob for a dunk. So just you doing those little like Draymond Green things in space where it's like, I don't need to have the ball for a lot of time, but I know how to weaponize my skills to create an advantage here. And those are the things that I think you can learn. Not quickly because you haven't seen enough situations, but you can be like, okay, if I watch enough film, this is how in this short spurt I can weaponize my game better. And so I think once you pair that with Trey, there's like a meaningful dynamic at play. And I think especially with like a bigger ball handler, like I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, with like Ben Simmons in this case. The way that the part of why he was so effective early in his career was because he was partnered with a shooting guard in JJ, who was like who was a low usage shooting guard, and I think people take for granted just how much of a skill it is to be able to be low usage and a punishing 3-point sniper. And like, there's so many guys in the league who need to have like a good 3 or 4 touches of feel before they really heat up. And like, there are a lot of guys who are Garrison Matthews in the NBA, where they're like good shooter when they have a feel, but if you're asking them to hit like 5 threes on like 11 dribbles, don't count on it, right? And that was JJ. And I think sort of some of the benefit of having a bigger ball handler, even with Ben Simmons' limitations, is he can see over anybody most of the time because even if they're like putting a point guard on him, he's still big enough to see over them. So even with his limitations, he can still make passes over the top. He can still see cutters and just at his size throw the ball from angles that most guards cannot defend. And obviously he flamed out and had his situation happen to him. But I think that's like sort of the blueprint for how you weaponize a bigger guard or a bigger ball handler like that. But for like Caris Levert, I'm kind of sad to see him out of Cleveland because he's an Ohio native, and I have a spot in my heart for guys who are like playing in their hometown. And obviously, I feel bad for anybody. No offense to the Hawks, I feel bad for anybody that goes from like 56-10 Cavaliers to like playing. Like that must be a very difficult pill to swallow. But George is loving it. It seems like he's scoring 20 on any given night. George is a good dude. He's going to talk some shit that he did last night. That's what he does. But he's going to shoot that ball a lot, and he's shooting pretty well. I think his game, people don't let. I mean, I think he's limited in the playoffs because of his athletic issues, but just like the way that he can eat minutes in a regular season and shoot the ball at a high clip is pretty valuable.
Yeah, I agree on all points for the most part. And I think one thing that's underrated about both Caris and George is like they came to the Hawks and they've bought in. Like they didn't have to, they didn't ask to be traded. But they came into a situation where, obviously it's not the same caliber team, but they've been almost better. And of course they have more minutes and they have more opportunity, but Caris had 7 assists last night. And it's like they're playing random here, right? So Onyeka catches it on the wing from Niang at the top of the key, and they just flow in a dribble handoff. They're going to play a 2-man game. Here's your point about the bigger ball handling. Like obviously Caris is nowhere near as big as Ben Simmons, but when they show high, right, he can lob that over the top of Grimes, as opposed to like if this is Trey, this probably has to be a wraparound where he has to pivot back around, right? So it just gives them a different look, and then Onyeka can use his size and his touch to score at the rim. And I think it's been so big for us because Caris is a way more willing passer than I realized. Him and Niang also have like some pretty good chemistry, of course, because they played two seasons in Cleveland. It's been pretty seamless for them. Here's what a look at some of that, something a little bit like Spain pick and roll. It's a bit of a different variation, but here Niang is going to ghost immediately on the ball, and then as Trey is pivoting to the right, as he's going right, Dom's screening that additional man. And then Niang's, of course, because he's that level shooter, he's going to draw that defensive attention. Man is going to drive, and then it's a skip pass to Caris, and then Caris drives, and then I was back to Terrence Mann. And I think what I've really loved about these acquisitions in general is like the bench has just played with so much more ball movement. Like this is not what it looked like when DeAndre Hunter and Bogdan Bogdanovic were on the floor. As good as DeAndre Hunter was shooting the ball, he doesn't process the game this quickly. He doesn't flow into space. He doesn't relocate. Not nearly as seamlessly or as effortlessly, right? So you see Trey's gravity, Grimes is going to cut out to him, and then it's an easy read for Caris to get it back to Terrence Mann. It's just like it's so much easier when you pass the ball like this, and it's so much easier when you have multiple guys who can dribble, pass, cut, and score. And like again, V. Krejci is another one of those guys. Like this tough, good drive from him, but it's because Caris is able to function, get off the ball, be smart, dive out of here because he knows that they're not going to be able to switch it in time. It's just smart basketball. It's simple basketball. And it's not things that, again, like for everything DeAndre Hunter is good at, this is not things he's good at, unfortunately. Like these are the types of things where like if you ask DeAndre Hunter to do this, he's probably going to kick it off his feet or hit a baby in the front row. And that's not, that's just the type of player he is. So I think it's been really rewarding to see Quinn Snyder's type of ball been played because they brought in guys. You talked about Niang a little bit. For anyone who didn't watch the game, Niang got into it with Quinn and Grimes. He told Grimes that the only reason he's playing like this is because Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid is out. He said, "You'd be sitting in the corner. You'd be sitting in the corner." Niang is I knew he talked trash. I didn't know it was like every game to everyone. And he's been a joy to have in Atlanta. Like I remember I asked him a question after the game, like about his defense, because as much as he almost loves this, he loves to force switches as much as he loves to talk trash. Like he loves to like take the challenge defensively. It isn't always the best option for him, right? But I asked him about like his decision making when he comes to switching, whatever, and he was like, "If I knew it was about defense, I wouldn't have come out for media availability, right?" Like so, because he had a great game that night. He had like 23. He's a hilarious dude. Like I think when he's hot, like of course the spacing and all that, but I think when he's talking spicy, it gives the Hawks a bit of an edge, right? And so I was just curious, like, as someone who was a fan, you had him on your team for a long time. He played obviously the most winless player since the 2020s. What's the Georges Niang experience? And then like, what should Hawks fans expect? Like temper our expectations for the playoffs, because I think like for me, it's like, oh, I don't know. I'm not saying the Hawks are gonna make a playoff run, but I'm saying like, I assume he may be on the roster next year because his shooting is that valuable. What is it about the playoffs that you think is like, okay, maybe he's not as effective?
So I think like his situation in Cleveland is interesting because they clearly felt like they needed to just get a big thing, a big dose of shooting injected into that team. So they over-indexed on it with Max Strus and then George. And George had a very good run in Philly 2 years. and like literally won the Sixers some games in the regular season. But I think that he's an example of somebody who's going to get pinched in the new CBA just because, like, as a coach, when you're trying to win playoff series and you're trying to maximize every minute, he's someone who you're very much like, I can play you for 2 minutes and then I need to like I need to play it by ear from there, because you might hit 2 threes for us, but you also are going to give us some issues with switch hunting and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so that was like a thing with the Sixers. Like, he was a really powerful, when he was hot, offensive weapon. He brought an energy to the game where it's like his engagement with the crowd and his engagement with, like, just bringing his, like, I'm the slower shooter, and he's someone who is typically more someone that you can identify with more as a fan, because it's like most fans will look more like George Niang than they do LeBron James. So I think he kind of, his ability to, like, interact with the fans, talk his shit, and then back it up with the shooting and hit big shots and sort of, yell and scream. Like, those are the things that I think sometimes you need to have a jolt of life into your team and sort of mix it up a little with the energy. He's a well-liked guy in the locker room, I can tell you that. He's someone who is not afraid of the crazy players. And every team has like a couple crazy guys, or at least the good teams have a couple crazy guys. He's not afraid to mix it up with them and be like, I'm not going to stand down. I'm not going to, like, just stand down to your intimidation. Like, I'm going to get, like, right back up into you. And that's like, and like the interaction you had with him is very much a George Niang interaction. I remember one time I asked him, like, something about defense, and he was like, well, you see me, right? Like, do I look like I'm a good defender to you? It's kind of like, was basically what he said. And I mean, George takes a lot of, I can tell you from some private interactions I've had with him, he takes a lot of pride in trying to mitigate his defensive circumstances as much as he can. But he's someone who you just enjoy as a person. His skill set is very useful in the regular season, to be sure. And he's just gonna fight. Like, he's just gonna fight and try to win his minutes as much as he can. I like how he throws his weight around in the paint. Like, he's not the most fleet of foot.
I didn't know he was that good at, like, attacking mismatches. He's pretty good at it.
Well, it's because, like, he just knows how to throw his weight into you and sort of be like, I'm not the most, like, agile guy, but I know I have some mass on you, so I'm just going to use that to my advantage. And he's like very able to, like, spin off of that and sort of make quick moves in that regard. But just an enjoyable presence for sure, and a valuable skill set. Are you guys tired of Quinn? Do you like Quinn in Atlanta? Because I feel like it's been like he put. I mean, I respected Nate McMillan. I thought he was a good coach. And then Quinn replaces him, and Quinn was billed as like a very high level coach coming out of Utah. So
here's the thing about, and it's funny because Nate McMillan was beloved after the Eastern Conference Finals run, because here's the first person who's always going to get the blame as the coach. I mean, you know that Lloyd Pierce was hated by the end of his tenure. Same thing with Nate McMillan. Both of those were kind of related to, like, their refusal to play the young guys. Like, Nate refused to play Jalen Johnson. Quinn comes in, and I think a lot of Hawks fans did not realize how flawed the roster was. DeJounte Murray, of course, a disaster of a trade. We're lucky that we got Dyson Daniels back, because that saved the franchise. If you make a trade like DeJounte Murray and you give up 3 first-round picks and you pair your star with a horrible fit, that sinks most franchises, right? So we're very fortunate to get the number 1 pick. We're very fortunate to get Dyson Daniels back. I think that a lot of Hawks fans' frustrations is just the perpetual playing performances. Okay, like, and I'm sure it's hard to get people to buy into, like, incremental growth as opposed to, like, let's make this swing, let's be dramatically better. It's very hard to see that growth also if you're not consistently watching. And so under Quinn Snyder, the Hawks, the first year, were one of the worst teams in the clutch they were better at when Quinn joined, but prior they were the worst team in the clutch. Season prior, 2024 season, also horrible in the clutch. This season, they have been so much better. And a lot of that is roster related. They have a defense they can actually lean on a little bit. But the biggest thing is that there's variety in the offense, right? There are sets being. One thing Nate McMillan didn't do was run sets. All he had was double drag. If you could defend the double drag, it was over. Like they were just going to spam pick and roll, high pick and roll with Trey. And I think it's so important for a team to perform well in the clutch to have some measure of versatility. The Hawks have been fluttering around 500 since Quinn joined. When Jalen Johnson was healthy, they were one of the best teams in the league against the best teams in the league, right? This season, they have the 5th most clutch wins, and they're 10th in win percentage in the clutch. Prior seasons, again, they were bottom 3. So you have to kind of dig for these measures of success with this Hawks team, unfortunately. And some of that's injury related, some of that is just overall roster construction, right? And I think for Quinn, I do wonder if to some extent, like, remember Quinn retired and then the Hawks job became available. And then in the immediate offseason, there were a ton of other jobs that became available. But I think a big reason why Quinn wanted to be a coach of the Hawks is that he wanted some measure of control over how the team was built and the type of vision they would put together. And as far as I understand, he does have that. So he has input on roster decision. He has input on acquisitions. Like, I'm sure he was a lot of the guys they've drafted or acquired is because of Quinn's influence as he's building out his idea for this roster. And I think when I look at this roster, okay, you mentioned it earlier in the show, right? You have this idea of versatility, length, and size around Trey. And that's what they've done. And you see these results in the way the defense has improved, the clutch performance, the performance against the best teams in the NBA. So I think for people like myself, right, we're big fans of Quinn. I love interviewing Quinn because he gives me, he'll dance around questions for sure, but like he'll respond when I give him advanced numbers or metrics, right? Because he understands those and he uses those. And I love that dynamic that I can have with him because he feeds into that as well. But I think that a lot of fans are results oriented, right? And this is not a team that's necessarily achieving those results. It's all about process right now. So no, he's not universally praised, or like, I would say that the average fan is probably a little bit frustrated. Some of the rotation stuff are valid too. Like, for example, he continually closes with Caris and Niang and not Risacher. And one thing I try and share with fans is that Risacher played 70 games as an 18-year-old in France against grown men. He finished his 72-game season, went to the combine, went to summer league, went to training camp, played preseason, and now he's playing consequential minutes for a decent team. Like, that's a lot of workload for him. And there are times where I see him look winded. There's times where he had an injury as well. And so I think as much as it is Quinn trusting veterans a little bit more, it's also about like managing Zach's minutes. And he closes games too. Like last night, he probably should have closed over Niang. He ended up not closing and then ended up playing like the last 2 minutes. But I don't have a big gripe with that because I understand that like trusting the vets is why we have a better clutch performance right now. Like Risacher, as good as he has been as of late, he's still more variable. So I'd say the biggest complaints about Quinn are like the results and then the lineups. And I think to some extent the lineup critiques are valid, but I think some of the result stuff is just out of his hands. Like to your point, if Jalen Johnson was healthy, this team's definitely above 40 wins right now. Like we lost 8 in a row after Jalen got hurt. And then immediately once we got reinforcements from the trade deadline, we're above 500 over that stretch. So I don't think it's a coincidence. I want fans to be a little bit more patient with Quinn, but I understand like this has not been a team that's seen a lot of success. And so a lot of them, we're still grabbing onto the Eastern Conference. Yeah, no, it's over. Like that team isn't even the same anymore, So I don't know. I think Nurse, I was curious on what Nurse reception or Nurse and Darryl in general in Philly, because I mean, you guys are a tough market, like maybe the toughest. And I'm like, how do the fans view those two?
Darryl is definitely not received well by the fans at the moment. You'd be surprised at how much of my life is spent thinking about this dynamic between like the fans and Darryl and whatnot. A lot of it obviously stems from like the fact that had Harden and then like the perception of him after the Harden trade request out of Philly. And then it was, signing Paul George to the max deal, and then Paul George looking like the way that he did this year. And then it was giving Joel his extension, and then the knee injury happening. And then, of course, people who are already Yes. Daryl detractors would point to like he has no resume. He did nothing in Houston. Those teams didn't win. All he's done is just recycle old Rockets and bring them back. And I think there is an element of truth to that. I think like breaking news, like guys who have pre-existing relationships with people around the league or tend to be like, hey, let's get, like I have your phone number, we're friends.
Yep.
Let's get something done here. But I also think like he's had some pretty big wins. I've gotten mixed feedback as to who was really responsible for this, but Tyrese Maxey was a big win. Is in his first draft, obviously. Yep. The reason that they are tanking so hard now is because they have to give up their pick, and that trade goes back to Daryl's first move in office, which was to trade off of Al Horford, who was a terrible fit, and get Danny Green. And getting off that money cost him the first round pick that is this pick this year. So obviously they are fighting for their lives to get that pick back in this draft. So if that goes awry, that's going to blow up in his face, of course. And Justin Edwards, good pick in the second round. They've found some good picks on undrafted free agency. Jared McCain was a good one. So I mean, I generally to me it's like you are like Daryl gets blamed for things that either are revisionist history, i.e. the Harden situation, like no one wanted to pay Harden after the flame out against Celtics, or it's things where it's like, okay, so what was the alternative? Like, what you didn't want to sign Paul George. Okay, so then what would you have done?
Right.
And then the other options bring you down roads where it requires getting off of assets to get those pieces in here, like a Jimmy Butler, for example. He didn't sign Tobias Harris to the contract that he did, and that was a big weight on this team for the first 4 years of his tenure with the Sixers. If I don't have concrete reporting either way, but if he does get shown the door this offseason, I would guess it's probably because he chose to give Joel the extension when he did, and now it's like we have no idea what the future holds for Joel, and it's a massive commitment for him financially that you might not be able to get out from under anytime soon. So people are very much not in Daryl's corner. It doesn't help that a lot of his like online behavior is victory circles when it's like a flashy move, and tweeting about like cryptocurrency and things like that, things that people don't really like. And then it's crickets when things aren't going well, which I from a human standpoint, you probably just face it head on. But I also understand like why you would be inclined to be like, I'm just not going to say anything until I have to. As for Nick Nurse, I think people are mostly like apathetic. I feel for Nick. They've had 46 different starting lineups this year, 47 different starting lineups. It's impossible to succeed with that. And he really has not had much of a chance to succeed here since the start. I mean, they have the first 31 games of last season where Joel is healthy, and they're just kicking teams' asses up and down the floor. And Joel looks awesome. He's the front runner for MVP. Tyrese Maxey is a burgeoning all-star. And then Joel goes down, and it's been chaos ever since. So I do feel for Nick in that regard. I do think he hasn't recused himself from the situation all that well, given that like a lot of their defensive concepts have led to their defense being atrocious. And like you saw it last night, it does not take much to beat the Sixers. All it takes is you running your hardest down the floor and getting behind them in transition, and you're going to get easy baskets out of it all season long. It's like one of the storylines has been, why are teams scoring so easily off of made baskets from the Sixers? Why are teams scoring so easily off of dead balls? Why isn't this team getting back in transition, or even just getting back in general? And it's like, how are these shots so open? So I don't think Nick has adjusted well. I don't think they've maximize their offense really that well with the pieces they do have. So I can't say Nick is free of blame, but I think he deserves, or I find it very hard to be like, he deserves my biggest rah-rah criticism when it just like the hand he's been dealt is almost impossible to play with. And I think any coach in his position would say the same thing. And I think, like, I know there was a coaches union. I'm not saying there would be like action taken or like a complaint if Nick got fired, but I do think that people would look at it like, the hell are you doing? How are you firing this guy when this is what he had at his disposal? So it'll be interesting to say the least.
Yeah. To your point about the transition stuff, the Hawks had their 6th highest transition frequency in a game against Philly last night.
Excellent.
22%. Yeah, 22% of their possessions started in transition. And the Hawks are like, most teams in general are better when they get out in transition because those are the highest efficiency possessions. The Hawks are 11-5 when that happens. So you don't give yourself a chance when you do that, right? I'm curious. Well, I have 2 questions. First thing, Al Horford has been really good next to like every big man he's ever played with in his career. What do you think it was about Philly next to Embiid? Like, why do you think that didn't work?
Coaching. I think they were at a period of time where it was like they were kind of showing signs of being done with Brett Brown. I also think that generally, like, there is this history of Joel just not fitting next to guys, or guys not fitting next to Joel. Whether whoever's fault that may be, I don't really know. I would say like you could tell like halfway, like people will say like Al Horford being his old self in Boston in this revival is an example of how people go to Philly and they just crater. It's like it's a curse. And I would say, sure, there is some like examples of how does this seemingly normal player just fall off a cliff when he goes to Philly and then immediately returns to stability when he leaves. I would also say like Al categorically started mailing it in about halfway through that first season in Philly, and it was very clear like he was just checked out and he was not the player that they needed him to be. So I would say that he does not get to get away scot-free with what happened in Philly. But I also think like there are examples of guys like Tobias Harris who have left and have made some comments after leaving, like about, you know, I'm excited to see Tyrese Maxey, and then the unsaid part is the part that stands out. You know, like he said Tyrese, but he didn't say Joel. Niang saying last night, if Joel were here, you'd be in the corner, I think is truth, and it's what happens when you have a super powered scorer the way Joel is. But I also think it's sort of one of the flaws of like when you don't have guys who are being used in a variety of ways. When Joel's on the floor, they don't really they're gonna struggle for at least a little bit when Joel goes down for a period of time. And so I think that's something that's always been an issue. Having said that, Joel has always thrived with like a lead ball handler who knew how to feed him the ball in his spots. He's never really backed down publicly, at least from like teammates pushing him and trying to get the most out of him. And I think just his skill is like, it's big, like the whole reason that people can talk about Joel in a critical manner is because he hasn't done it when it matters most. But the skill is a different story. Like players of that caliber just simply live by their own rules, really. And the team is built around them for a reason.
So I really like that point you just made where you said, you know, when you have a guy who's that skilled, when he's out, how can the team adjust if they don't get those reps, you know, when he's healthy? And last night, okay, you guys got to the free throw line at the 4th highest rate the Hawks have allowed all season. Some of that was them not being locked in, I think. But it's also the 3rd most shots they've allowed at the rim, percentage-wise. The effectiveness obviously wasn't there. We talked about Edwards being able to get downhill. Grimes had 10 free throw attempts. O'Shea Brissett had 6. When you see these, like, how conducive do you think these minutes are going to be in terms of like bolstering the rotation when hopefully Embiid's healthy and PG's healthy? Because I want to draw a parallel, at least a little bit, to like what happened for the Grizzlies last year, right? So Ja Morant was out all season. And so as a result, Desmond Bane, Santi Aldama, Jaren Jackson Jr., they grew so much because they had those reps. I think it's a little bit different because you have so many guys out, right? McCain, I think this would have been massive for him to have this entire season. I think he's still going to be great, but it's not this exact parallel. I think the rotation pieces, I see Edwards as a rotation piece. I see Bone as a rotation. I see McCain, certainly. I see Grimes. What do you think these minutes are going to do for them when hopefully you get that fully healthy iteration?
It's so hard to say because I think one of the things that we don't really know and that we're never going to know until next season, well, that's assuming Joel comes back healthy, which this point, who knows? One of the things that like we don't know is how is Grimes going to respond in a less ball-centric role. And like he's doing all this under the guys that or under the premise that he is just governing the offense. And will he be able to be as effective when Joel is having a usage rate of 35%, when Maxey has a usage rate of 32%, whatever it might be? So one of the things that like I'm going to look at when I'm evaluating them or him going forward is like, how much did he outshoot his expected field goal percentage or his like shot quality? Yep. Because one of the things he's done impressively with the Sixers is he's just obliterated the shot quality. Like he's made an absurd array of just difficult shots. And you know, they're putting 2 on him and he's gliding to the rim. He's finishing difficult shots at the basket. He is making threes off the dribble. He's making contested long twos. And I'm not someone who's a big fan of contested long twos for a guard, but he's just blown away everything. So we'll see if that's him riding a heater in a low stakes environment and just trying to gun for a contract in his contract year. But he's a restricted free agent with bird rights, so it's entirely in the Sixers court to be like, yeah, we'll pay you. But his defense has not stepped back at all. He's still been a very spirited defender. He's had an absurd usage when he's been on the floor, and he's just taken it in stride, and he's had big fourth quarters and big clutch shots. So he's done everything you could have possibly have asked for him. He's just you're intentionally trying to lose games, so it's hard to grade. But it will be interesting when like they're trying to piece together like what he's worth, and if a team, for example, like let's say a team with nothing to lose, what's to stop the Brooklyn Nets from throwing a 4-year, $80 million offer sheet at Quentin Grimes, and do the Sixers match that? And on top of that, it's like some would say that there's 2 arguments to be made. Like one is you got him for a very unsteady, uncertain KJ Martin and a 2nd round pick. You didn't give all that much to get him, so you can have a higher risk tolerance for letting him walk, which I think was sort of part of the logic for letting Jimmy Butler go. Like you didn't give up that much to get him, so you don't have to feel so out leveraged in trying to keep him, right? And I think the same can be said about Quentin. Other side of the coin is like, if you give up so little to get him, you should do everything in your power to try to keep him, because that's an asset that you got and a rare win. You know, in the sense that like you took advantage of a GM Nico Harrison, who seems to be out of his mind. So we'll see. The quotes on exit interview day will be pretty are usually pretty telling.
Yeah. Where do you think McCain factors into that? Like, obviously, you have Maxey as entrenched, penciled in as that guard. Where do you think McCain's started, his, what was it, 20, 30, maybe it's probably 30-ish games. Where do you think he factors into like the price for Grimes and that rotation? Because I don't know if you can really have all three. I think you can, like at the right price, yes, but like feasibly, can you build that rotation? If you have three, yes, all three guys who punch above their weight, they're all competitive. Like, do you think they can, like, where does McCain fit in is my question.
So I think number one, you have more equity in McCain because you use the draft pick on him.
Right.
I mean, you kind of have equity in Quentin Grimes, but you also only traded away a contract and a second round pick to get him. It isn't like you used a first round pick in any sense. And I think McCain played quite well at a point in the season when you were still trying to compete for something in the short term. So you're going to logically, you would favor those results.
Yeah.
Probably more so than you favor what Quentin Grimes is doing for the skeleton version of this team when you're trying to lose. But I would say, like, I had this whole list of like stats that I was looking at on Basketball Reference and just trying to filter through rookies who had done what McCain was doing, efficiency, minutes, usage, what have you. And he was doing things that only like Zion Williamson had done as a rookie in the past like 20 something years. So he was easily the favorite to win Rookie of the Year prior to the meniscus injury. I still don't know like what he is as like a lead guard, mostly because he doesn't have much experience and he's only played like a supporting role. I do think he's clearly got better playmaking chops than Tyrese does. I also think that there's something to be said for the fact that he's a much more intuitive off-ball mover than Tyrese is. So it's like Tyrese they can sort of take turns being the ball handler while the other is moving around off the ball. I think you run into issues when it's like you have all of these guys who are 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", who comprise a lot of your cap sheet, who are all below the 6'5" threshold that I arbitrarily assign, just because you don't want to have too many high level rotation players who are below 6'4", 6'5". So I think there is something to be said there. I also think that it makes the case where if you end up with like the second pick in the draft, why you should be so locked in on Dylan Harper, because he is 6'5", 6'6". He's a bigger point guard. He's going to be able to make passes over with his size that traditional point guards can't make. And so you can weaponize Tyrese and Jared and Quentin off the ball more if you keep all three of them. And I just think from what I've seen of Dylan Harper, he's a much more intuitive playmaker than any of those guys are. So I think it does make for roster construction complications if you are employing those three long term and they are making significant money on your cap sheet. It does help if it does help that Jared is the one who Jared is still on a rookie deal for the foreseeable future. So it isn't like you're committing tens of millions of dollars to him in the next 2 years. But you do have to make you probably have to do some creative things in terms of how you play them, and what lineups you use them, who's coming off the bench and who isn't. So glad it's not my job.
Yeah. And I always had respect for Maxey and McCain. When I walked into the arena, I walked past Jared McCain and he was like an inch taller than me. And that really put into perspective, like what he had been doing, not just at Duke, but like in the NBA. Like he's so special. Same thing with Maxey. And so I've thought about that height thing and like what you just said about Dylan Harper. So overall, like what is your process for this draft for the Sixers? Like you mentioned, like you have these certain things you value. Like if you're taking, top 5, like what's your process? What do you think this team needs?
So I think, like, first and foremost, I think you need to get, if you don't end up with a top 2 pick, I think you need to get a one of these wings. Like if you have somewhere between 3 and 5, it's got to be Edgecombe. It's got to be Trey Johnson. It's got to be Ace Bailey. I think there's like an outside chance that I would be interested in Malawak from Duke. But I just think like probably isn't a great idea to introduce the concept that you have Joel Embiid's replacement while Joel Embiid is battling or is trying to recover from this injury. Like I understand it's a business and you have to be, like you can't worry about hurting Joel's feelings, but at the same time, he is the face of your franchise in theory. He is somebody who's been through a lot and stayed loyal to this team. And he's spoken at great length about how this injury has messed with his mental health. And I think if you plant the seed while he's trying to recover at a sensitive time in his career, that you have a guy who you're molding to be his eventual replacement, it could be a problem. And so I would so I just don't think Malawak is worth the reach at this point. That could change as I get deeper into my evaluation process. But I tend to think like Cooper is number one by a country mile. I don't think it's really, I think a country mile was putting it lightly.
Right. Yeah,
just, I think it's so underrated feel for the game and how like it's a very generalized statement that we like to make in the scouting world. But it really is so true. Like you can't, some things you just can't teach, and guys just have a gift. And I think the way Cooper processes the game at game speed is just tremendous. And it's not something that can be taught. And there are like, I said this to a couple of friends yesterday. I'm like, I don't like being the guy who does this because I've always been one to be like, let the kids be rookies and let them play and don't put these ridiculous expectations on them. But at the same time, if the skill set reminds you of someone, And for me, it's like I see doses of Jokic and how he makes plays out of the short roll and how like he will beat a lifted big over the top with a lob at the rim. I see doses of Bird with some of the shot making off the dribble and quick moves. I think the best comp for him, the most fair comp for him, is like a supercharged Andre Kirilenko. Just like the quick movements, the rim protection, the decision making off the dribble. I see some Lamar Odom in him, but I think he's by far the best player in this draft. Like the only true guy who I feel like 100%. Well, maybe he and Dylan Harper, the only two guys who I'm like 100%. These are stars. Which leads me to my second point that Dylan Harper is number 2 for me right now. Pretty clear to me. And then it gets pretty murky. As much as this draft is built for its like talent at the top, I think there's a pretty steep drop off after 2. And so like in some order, it's Edgecombe, who I was not all that impressed with in the tournament, even though he like the athleticism is very real to me.
He's pretty heavy off ball guy. Like you think about that, but he's very much a ball guy.
Yes, but I also would argue that a lot of these guys in this draft are heavy off ball players, and I think I think coaches in college just tend to lean more towards they're more senior ball handlers, they're more experienced ball handlers, and if you don't have a feel as a lead ball handler, like for being a point guard, like if you don't have a feel for that naturally, then you're just going to be an off ball guy. And so like Ace Bailey was very clearly the second fiddle at Rutgers, but he also didn't do much to recuse himself. Like I've scouted him. He's the only guy I've done an in-depth report on scouting wise. And I could not be less intrigued by him. And the only reason I would draft him top 5, having said that, is because the shot making at his size is unbelievable. And if I'm taking a bet on upside, that's a guy you got to take a bet on. But at the moment, I'm just like, he has very little passing vision. His defensive presence is very much lacking. Defends with flat feet. He take some awful shots, and that's hard to do. It's hard to take bad shots when you're his size, but that's because he's just forcing shots all the time. I'm in the middle of scouting Trey Johnson right now. I like him better in the moment than I do Ace. That's because he's just a stud shot maker, and I think he's has a better defensive IQ. I still would, if I had to pick the more likely to become a star, it would probably be Ace, but I like Trey today more than I do Ace. I still have a lot to learn about BJ Edgecombe and a lot of these guys, but I think if I'm the Sixers, I'm taking the best guy available, but I'm also not reaching to fulfill some philosophical need. Like if your philosophy is you gotta get better at rim protection, okay, but you also don't have enough talent depth right now, and you're also trending towards pretty old, so you gotta like get some youthful talent in here that you can grow, because right now, like the concept of Paul George and Joel Embiid isn't doing much to draw anybody in, and so that's sort of where I would lean if I were Philly. I know the Hawks have San Antonio's pick.
We have Sacramento's, and then we have the Lakers pick. So Sacramento's top 12 protected.
San Antonio has the Hawks pick.
San Antonio has our pick. Yeah.
Well, at least you guys are in the play-in though. It's not like See, that pick should probably be somewhere around like 15, 16.
So. I think right now it's 16, which is I remember Spurs fans were like, caveat, one of you got hurt, but they were victory lapping, saying that they're going to finish with a higher seed than us and get the lottery pick, and now it's flip flop. So they're in the lottery, and we're So it's funny how things work out. But I'm very much in alignment with you on Cooper. I think he's heads and shoulders above the rest of the class. I think for me, I think Colin Murray Boyles is someone I'm a huge fan of. If you haven't had a chance to watch him, I would definitely. You said what?
No, he's not Purdue.
No, he's at South Carolina. So played off very tough SEC. Team was not very good. We talked a little bit about like sometimes when you're like to build star tendencies, you've got to see star coverages. He saw a lot of that. Has to develop a lot as a shooter, but we talked a little about like the short roll playmaking and like the dribble handoff stuff you can do like Draymond Green-esque. He's elite at that. Super strong, great touch. I personally have him in the same tier as Dylan Harper right now. My questions about Dylan is more so like some of the shooting stuff, but I think that he's pretty clearly going to be a guy that I think he's going to need a lot of usage. And obviously guards are always pretty like rough when they come to the NBA. I think his intrinsic feel is really good. I think he's a walking paint touch. I think he's ambidextrous around the rim. He's going to be a free throw magnet. So I feel really good about those two guys. And then similar to you, I have my questions about VJ. I have endless questions about Arias. Like I went to watch Ace play in high school, and he's playing the exact same way he did at Rutgers. Like he played for a pretty bad team called McEachern High School down here. His center was awful. They got to the national championship game off the strength of his shot making. And to his credit, he made some good reads in that game when I went to watch him. But a lot of it was still like, you're 6'10", you're 4 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier, maybe 30 pounds heavier than everyone else on the floor. Like, get to the rim, get to the free throw line, and he would instead catch the ball and fade 20 feet away from the basket out of bounds. So
that's like another thing. I think his size, like I think I know he's listed on Rutgers' website as being 4 or 5 inches taller than Dylan Harper, but 15 pounds lighter. He's gonna get. He needs to put on significant weight fast.
Oh yeah. He's legit 6'10" though. Like he is that size. There were times he grabbed rebounds like staring at the rim. His standing reach, like he could easily touch the top of the square. And so that's where I think the defensive stuff, yes, he needs to get better. But if he can just simply understand positioning and timing, he's going to be a force, like as a weak side rim protector. And so that's why I think like Trey Johnson is better instinctually right now. But I'm honestly very worried about Trey's defense. Like when I watch him, I'm like, can he be neutral? I'm not exactly convinced yet. I need to watch more. But
I think one of my big takeaways from Trey so far is like Roddy Terry was very clearly trying to hide him off ball as much as he could. And he very rarely like there were some examples of him getting put into more on ball schemes. Like Calipari tried to get him on ball when they played Arkansas. when they played Arkansas, and Trey had like 37 points. You could see them Arkansas trying to get him more on the ball and in the action, because they knew that Trey just could not guard the ball, and he was getting devoured as a ball defender, which is interesting because I think he has a generally pretty good awareness for where he should be off the ball. And that's more than I can say for Ace, who is a back cutting machine, gets back cut to oblivion. He has no idea where rebounders are crashing from. He gets beat to the basket on rebounds all the time. I think another thing that doesn't really show up that we have to consider when we're thinking about top of the lottery is like, how bad do you want it to be a star? And that's a very hard thing to measure, because if it was a thing that you could measure, then teams would not have busts. That busts would rarely happen. And I look at Ace, and I see someone who, the way that he plays is very deferential. It's someone who doesn't really bend the game. And there's not a lot of him like governing the offense himself. And it's very much like Dylan can do it, and I'm happy to sit in the corner and watch. And I don't know what, if anything, makes him tick. And like an example of this that is very pertinent to Atlanta. So I was teammates with Cam Reddish in high school. And
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
for a year. You were teammates in high school.
Okay.
And he was like, even back then, all world talent. He was very unquestionably the prodigal son. And you just thought back then, like, does he take it seriously enough? Talent's very obvious. The physical gifts are very obvious. Does he want it enough? And I think the way his NBA career has played out, it's been like, you can see like there just isn't a star mentality there. And I don't feel that much differently about Ace. And now, with maturity, could he get there? Does he have better skills, better gifts? Yeah, maybe. But you also have to want to be great, and you also have to want you have to crave the moment and be obsessed with the big moment. And if you are, then you will be a star. And if you aren't, then you'll be more like Andrew Wiggins, or more like guys who were billed as high lottery picks and just never quite put it all together.
No, definitely good points. And I think it's really apparent when you watch Rutgers in the clutch this year, it was Dylan Harper. It was Dylan Harper slashing, getting to the paint. And like, again, I saw him in high school and I saw him take that ownership offensively. But I think that, and it's hard to kind of tease out, okay, how much of this is him playing a role versus how much is this him deferring because he wants to be deferential, and he thinks that, it's okay to think Dylan's a better shot creator. I think that's fine. But at the same time, like, I didn't always see him like lifting when Dylan would drive or putting himself in position to be impactful down the stretch. So I definitely agree with that. He's someone that I think he's going to be one of the tougher evals, like, as of late. Like, like, he obviously has so much potential, but he could also really burn a team like pretty badly. And that's why I think he may go, in the back half of like the top 10, as opposed to where he was mock consensus at the beginning of top 5. He'll be really interesting. And I wondered, like, I always wish I could get the interviews, but I think the interviews with him will be really interesting too, like really unpacking him and understanding his psyche. But look, Austin, I really appreciate you taking the time. Definitely want you to, plug any work you've got going on and, any upcoming stuff.
So yeah, if you're an NBA fan looking to sort of laugh at the Sixers, get caught up with what's going on with the Sixers, you can catch my work at onpattison.com. We are less than a year old, so we are building there. But I'm on the Sixers beat, and they're at every home game. I cover the team. Yeah, you can find my work there for sure. And thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for coming on. To everyone listening, appreciate you. Please make sure you follow Austin. It'll be in the description below. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.